Okay, so I've selected this particular case for a number of reasons. First, it is a case involving a principle that we're addressing at this time. The second reason is that it is a case that is a landmark case, so an extremely important high-level court case. And the third is that I'm going to be walking through how to analyze a case. In other words, what is important to pull out of a case, as you have two assignments this semester that require you to do that. The first being a group assignment where you are assigned to a particular principle, and you will be required to find a case and develop a PowerPoint within your group to present later on in the semester. And the final project is an extensive historical review of cases. You will be doing an individual research project on a particular principle that you select, and you will go back through history selecting a number of administrative procedure level cases. That would be the hearing officer level. You can select state level, circuit level, or Supreme Court level, but you have to analyze the principle over time. In other words, what have the courts said about in their decisions in terms of the particular principle? How has it evolved? And you'll be doing that as a final project. So let's go through this case of Timothy W. versus the Rochester, New Hampshire School District. Certainly one of the most important things is the title, because that gives us a sense clearly of who is the plaintiff and who are the defendants. The court level is important, and we see that this is a very high level court. It's a circuit level court, so right below the Supreme Court level. And we see the date of the decision that it was rendered by the last court that heard the issue related to the plaintiff, which is Timothy W. So depending on the level of case that you're analyzing will depend on how much background information you can give in your write-up or your PowerPoint. This is a high-level case, so it took a number of years to resolve. So you'll find that certainly at the hearing officer level, that's just the first level. But for this child, it wasn't until 1989 that the First Circuit rendered its decision. But in 1980, you see, Mother already started to deal with the particular issue that will not really resolve itself very quickly. So give some background information in your cases, and I'm not going to read the PowerPoints word for word, but just to summarize here, essentially Timothy W. is a child with severe and multiple disabilities, severe intellectual disabilities and multiple disabilities, and the mother tried to enroll him in his local kindergarten in 1980. Now we know the first federal special education law, the Education for All Handicapped Children Act, began in 1975, and this is 1980. Zero reject was already in the law in 1975 as a principle. So what's going on here? Because what we see is that the local education agency, the district, denied Timothy an education at that point, indicating that he was not capable of benefiting from education. There were a number of things going on concurrently, and so just some background information on that. In 1982, the State Department of Education reviewed the district's program and found it out of compliance. So this is a district that was already out of compliance with special education regulation, as all states have to monitor districts. But what was happening in particular for Timothy at that time is the district met again in 1983 to discuss Timothy and still refused him an education. But in response to a recommendation for educational services from a specialist in 1984, they did ask for more information on Timothy. Timothy's mother filed a state complaint in 1983, and we see that the state again attempted to intervene, and they ordered the district to place Timothy within 5 days, but the district at that point filed an appeal. So, in 1984, a complaint was filed in the U.S. District Court to seek an injunction to direct the district to provide services and pay damages. And in 1985, the U.S. District Court found for the district and denied that injunction. The reason they did so is that, and I have it underlined and in bold, they suggested that Timothy's mother exhaust her administrative procedures. Now, that is part of the law, so that a parent or a district can't just jump to a higher level court. They need to go through the due process procedures as outlined in the law, the conflict resolution procedures, not conflict resolution in terms of we can't force a parent to go to mediation or even resolution meetings, but they have to use the due process level as the first level. So, but meanwhile, the State Commissioner of Education ordered a diagnostic prescriptive program for Timothy in a special segregated program in the district. Timothy's teacher at the time prepared the summary and said, yes, that Timothy could benefit from an education. And after further requests by the mother, Timothy was placed in a segregated special school and remained there until 1987. So there's some things going on, but we still have to have this due process hearing, and that occurs. And so the hearing officer, had the hearing, heard testimony, looked at evidence, and pretty much said that, yeah, Timothy, by law, is identified as a child with a disability, and the law is pretty clear that an eligible child is entitled to a free and appropriate public education. The district appealed in the U.S. District Court in 1987, filing a counterclaim. Timothy's mother responded with a cross motion for summary judgment to decide whether Timothy qualified as a child and should be educated. Now, simply what that means, that last sentence there, is that, rather than going to court and going through this whole process again, which, having a hearing is like being in court, that the mother's asking for a decision to be made in the U.S. District Court without going through that. And there's many reasons why either side would make a motion for a summary judgment. The district court rendered its decision, and when you read this, it's a little unclear in that it looks like they're deciding in favor of the parent, but in fact they are not, and Timothy's mother appealed then finally to the circuit level court, and this case was brought into the First Circuit. So whether it's a due process hearing or it's heard at the state level or it's heard at a circuit or even the Supreme Court level, there's always issues. And so when you when you analyze your case, you need to identify what are the issues that are being heard and that need to be decided upon. In Timothy's case, the issues were, is he in fact a child with a disability as defined by law? And at this point, the law was not named IDEA. It was named the Education for Handicapped Children Act. And if he is a child with a disability, was he denied a free and appropriate public education? And what's happening at this point, since it's at the First Circuit level and the district ruled in favor of the state level court ruled in favor of the district, the First Circuit then has to decide, did the last court err in its ruling? All right, and so those are the issues brought on behalf of Timothy. Now, another area that you're going to have to address in your analysis is the argument or findings of fact. Depending on what you review, you might be able to find a lot of the facts that were presented. If not, you certainly will be able to find and pull out the arguments. And so the plaintiff is arguing one side, the defendant is arguing another side, and also who has to prove their case. At the time, the defendants had to prove that Timothy was not able to benefit. But essentially, the argument on the plaintiff's side is that there's not any real fact that children with significant disabilities can't be educated. There's not any fact to prove that. And the district cannot deny educational benefits to a child based on disability level. and an appropriate education cannot be determined to be no education. The defendants are arguing, of course, that Timothy has to demonstrate that he'll benefit from special ed and that Timothy was deemed not educable. So the district is not obligated to provide an education. So what did the judge decide at the First Circuit level? Well, certainly decided that Timothy is a child with a disability and therefore eligible for services. The judge decided that Timothy was denied a free and appropriate public education. The judge decided at that time that a child with disabilities does not need to demonstrate benefit from special education in order to be eligible for education. And so the order was that Timothy was immediately placed in an interim special education placement until an IEP could be developed and agreed upon by all parties. And the court was remanded to the district court to determine issues of damages. Now, damages will not be like winning the lottery. We're not looking at a large money payout. What we're looking at is education for the child. And that could take many forms. That could take, additional tutoring. It could take a special program that might require more resources, etc. So it might offer education beyond age 21 to Timothy. So at this point, the circuit court judge said, you guys at the last court decide the damages to be awarded. So this is an important case because even though the principle of zero reject was in the original law, we get a high-level court saying, you need to do your job and you can't deny anyone, any child, doesn't matter their level of disability. You cannot deny that child an education. So we see that the law is in place, but is not always implemented correctly the way it should be or the way it is written. And these court cases help to define the law and interpret the law and make sure that it is implemented. And so you need to make sure that you have written the final decision as well as the order. And that takes us through Timothy W.